Hello, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Welcome to 2026 Live Critical Reasoning. This is episode number 7, almost to the end here, guys. So today we're going to talk about some of the oddities of critical reasoning. So a couple of really specific question types. So what to do when you see an accept question. I'm going to show you a very simple technique to avoid making a careless error on those because there's a mistake I see over and over. So we'll talk about accept questions, fill in the blank questions. So which of the following most logically completes the passage? They give you a blank. Certain technique for those, nothing too fancy. And then we're going to talk about just some weird ones. So a lot of the way people approach studying for critical reasoning, hey, I'm going to focus on strength and weaken questions and assumption questions, and I'm going to learn very, very specific things for each. But then there's a whole family of questions that just don't fit. So you can think of it this way. Today, in part, is all about flexibility. So you can't always apply exactly the same thing to every question. The GMAT gets kind of creative with their questions sometimes. A few examples here. Let me toss up here. And we're not going to talk about necessarily these specific examples today. But just some examples of question phrasings that don't fit neatly into a box. The argument given concerning the reasonable way to set standards presupposes that, wait, what? Which of the following hypotheses best accounts for the findings of the experiment? The author develops the argument by doing what? What's the point of disagreement between these two people? We will talk about that question today. And the objection implied to the productivity measured blah, blah, blah is based on doubts about the truth of which of the following. Now, what I don't want you to do with things like this is try to shoehorn them into a certain question type. I want you to think broadly. So one of the things we've talked about throughout the series, everything we do with critical reasoning, I want you to be systematic. I always want you to think structurally. If there's a conclusion, find it. Get the conclusion and the support. Their words, not yours. If there's something like a paradox or discrepancy, what are those two statements that are discrepant or seemingly contradictory? Make sure you're really precise with them. But sometimes as you get to these kooky question types, I want you to find the heart of the passage. There might be something you can pin down, a plan, for example, a goal. There might be something that's a little bit stranger that doesn't fit neatly into a box. So part of what we'll work on today is that flexibility. As usual, not the hardest questions in the world, but not the easiest either. These are, for the most part, going to be about 650, 700 level questions, roughly. I've got a couple nasty ones in there. We'll see if we get to those today. All right. With that, I'm going to start you off with an accept question today. And by the way, one last video in this series, at least that's the plan. Episode 8 coming up 2 weeks from today for anybody watching here in June 2026. We're going to cover the nastiest, hardest critical reasoning questions I can track down. Most of you don't need to do that, but it's a good way to get a sense of, hey, what's the end of the rainbow? So how rough can these get? We'll mostly go through questions that if your score goals are not crazy, you don't necessarily need to cover these, but I have a lot of fun doing the super hard ones. So we'll do that 2 weeks from today. Next week is NBA Spotlight. Make sure you register for that. Then we'll finish up the critical reasoning series and then go from there. All right. Go ahead and tackle this first question. Live group, as always. As soon as you have thoughts on this, please let us know. Great to see familiar faces, or at least familiar names. Swetha, Taha, Dimitri. Great to see you all. Right, as always, if you need more time, hit that pause button. Okay, so yeah, this if you followed the whole series, this question should look not this question, but this question type should look familiar, right? So again, I always want you to think, what's the heart of the passage? I want you to be precise with it. Not everything has a conclusion. In this case, we've got a plan, right? So this is going to look a lot like what we did in the previous video. We've got a plan, Tanco, leather manufacturer, so it wants to use potassium chloride. I just shortened it up to the chemical name because writing takes time. So use potassium chloride in place of common salt. Well, why is it that they want to do that plan? Well, there's new regulations and they significantly increase the cost of disposing of salt water. And a lot of that apparently is given off by their current process. So Tanco could then reprocess the byproduct of potassium chloride into crop fertilizer. And there's only going to be a little bit of waste for disposal. Okay, plan sounds good. We see the rationale for it. Now, what the question is asking us, this is where you kind of have an element that's evaluate the plan. But the question kind of points in the direction of what exactly is the goal. So when we did conventional plan, goal, consequence kind of questions, it was always get the plan, get the goal. Their words, not yours. Here, while they're kind of giving you the goal in the question, not in the passage, that's fine. So in determining the impact on company profits of using potassium chloride in place of common salt, it would be important to research each of the following except. Okay. Here's where I see mistakes on except questions. So if you take away only one thing from this part of the video, this is what I want you to take away. On except questions, it's really easy to get twisted around, especially as the answer choices get tough for you. Once you're back and forth between two answer choices, it's really easy to pick the wrong one because you're focused on, hey, what's important to know? What's going to be useful to know? What's going to be useful to know? What's important for them to know? What I want staring you in the face every single time you see an except question, cross out anything that blank, and obviously this blank is going to be different depending on the exact question. In this case, it's going to be cross out anything that, so we'll say impacts, well, we'll just say affects company profits. If they're going to make this switch. Now, why is it so important? The mistake I see over and over and over, people go, okay, yeah, A, I see how it affects company profits, so that's out. B, I don't know, I'm going to keep that in. C, yeah, I see that affects company profits, I get rid of that one. D, boy, I don't know. E, yeah, okay, it's not that one. And then you're back and forth between B and D, B and D. Which one is important to know about company profits? Which one's important to know? Which one's important to know? Oh, D is important to know. Okay. But that's backwards. You want to cross out the thing that's important to know. And you might look at this and go, I would never make that mistake. I promise most of you will make that mistake if you do enough except questions. We see almost everybody do it. Very, very easy fix. This should be staring in the face every time. So even if you're somebody that doesn't typically write a lot down when you do critical reasoning, this is the one thing I want just staring in the face. It'll stop you from making the careless error. And as you guys probably know by now, adaptive tests like the GMAT, it's those careless errors that kill you. So one very, very small tweak, again, whether you're somebody that tends to write things down or not, I just want this looking in the face every time you see an except question. It'll just insulate you from trouble. All right, with that, I don't think D is the answer here. So I'm gonna erase all this. So A, what difference, if any, is there between the cost of the common salts needed to preserve a given quantity of animal hides and the cost of potassium chloride? Would that be important to know if we're trying to determine the effect on company profits? Yeah, obviously, you want to know the cost of these two different things. Super important. We're going to cross that out because we're crossing out things that are important to know. B, to what extent is the equipment involved in preserving animal hides suitable for preserving animal hides using potassium chloride instead? Obviously, super important to know if you have to buy new equipment once you make the switch to potassium chloride. That costs money, going to affect profits. So B definitely is important to know. It's out. C, what environmental regulations, if any, constrain the disposal of waste generated in reprocessing the byproduct of potassium chloride? So I see a few people in the live group who picked this one. So this one feels, I think, a little bit distant to some of you, where it's like, wait, environmental regulations? Well, you might say the environmental regulations, well, that's not talking directly about cost or profit. Maybe that's tempting. But when you think about what they said in the passage, they said, hey, new environmental regulations significantly increase the costs of disposing of salt water. A lot of why this whole conversation about switching to potassium chloride is even happening is because the regulations increase the cost of disposal of salt water. Okay, so what if there's environmental regulations that are going to make it really expensive to dispose of or to reprocess whatever waste happens in reprocessing the byproduct of potassium chloride? that could really affect your costs too, right? So if they make it prohibitively expensive to dispose of whatever waste, might be a small volume, but it's still waste in that reprocessing, well, that's going to affect your profits too. If it's something that's important to know for profits, what are the environmental regulations around this? Then we cross it out. C is out. Some of the live group pick D. How closely does leather that results when common salt is used to preserve hides resemble that when potassium chloride is used instead? I wouldn't blame you if you want to hang on to this and go, well, does that directly affect profits? But if you think about it a little bit, well, they've been using salt forever. Okay, that works. The company's operational. They must be selling a lot of these hides that are preserved using salt. Okay, well, what if you do it with potassium chloride and the quality is terrible? Maybe it looks totally different. Maybe people don't want to buy it anymore. Would that affect profits? Yeah. I would definitely want to know if my end product is just as good using this new process, because that can affect profits as well. So I'm going to get rid of D because that's definitely important to know. Is my end product still going to be good? I want to know that if I'm concerned about company profits. E, I hope we like E, or I guess I hope we don't like E, however you want to think of it. Are the chemical properties that make potassium chloride an effective means for preserving hides the same as those that make common salt an effective means for doing so? This we don't care about. We care if the potassium chloride is effective. We care if it's cost effective. We care if we need new equipment to use them instead. We don't really care how the chemistry works, which kind of sounds weird in real life. Like, hey, if I were doing this, if I owned a leather manufacturing company, of course I'd want to know what exactly is going on chemically, but it actually doesn't really affect profits, right? So however it works is however it works. And it's really not a direct concern to profits if the chemical process is the same, as long as the result is the same. So E doesn't really matter for this. We're not going to cross it out. We're going to keep it because it has no direct bearing on company profits. All right. You guys are pretty quiet today. Seeing lots of answers, but not a lot of chatter on this question, which is all good. Okay. Bottom line, biggest takeaway. If you take only one thing away from this video, or at least this part of the video, I want this staring in the face. Cross out anything that blank. It'll just stop you from making that careless error. And you might go, yeah, I don't have the time to do it. It takes you very little time to do this. And I promise we've seen this mistake over and over and over. We put you under time pressure on the exam. Just make sure you're baking in that little step to help make sure you don't make that mistake. Good luck. Good luck on your retake. That's awesome. I'm honored that you're spending today with us. Get some rest. Go do something relaxing after this. No more thinking about the GMAT. Get some sleep. Get a great meal. Go see a friend if you have time for that, depending on what time zone you're in. Relax. Don't think about the GMAT so much. Go kick butt in the morning. Best of luck to you. Let us know what happens. Seriously. Tag me on GMAT Club. Tag me here on YouTube. All right. Next question. This is a fill in the blank. So what we're going to do today, except just now, fill in the blank question. I'm going to give you a weird one after that. Then we'll mix it up and do weird accept and weird fill in the blank questions. Go and take a moment on this one. All right, live group, awesome. You guys are steaming through this one pretty quickly. If you're not watching live, pause if you need to, as always. Okay, I didn't get a chance to write down absolutely everything I needed here because, again, live group's going pretty quickly. Don't want to bore you guys if you don't need more time on it. Fill in the blank questions. So accept questions. I said, hey, one small little thing. Why am I holding up two fingers? One small little thing that can help you a lot. Write down, cross out anything that blank. Here on these fill in the blank questions, complete the argument, whatever you want to call them. I want you to write something like this down every single time, or at least think about it very consciously. What exactly is that blank doing? So yeah, often the most typical structure on these fill in the blank questions, most of the time, not all the time, I would say a small majority of the time, you're going to be supporting something. They almost always have since blank or because blank. So a good chunk of the time, it's going to be like this. The role of the blank is to support something, to support typically some sort of conclusion. Now, there are exceptions to that. Time permitting, we'll get through one of those today. So I want you to be flexible. Here, what are we doing? Role of the blank is just to support this thing, this conclusion that the new drug is clearly preferable as a treatment. Well, what's the support for that? Well, we know a couple things, right? So this new drug is an effective treatment for a certain disease, and we'll say the most commonly prescribed drug. I'll shorten this up a little bit. There's seizures, right? It's only occasional. So what exactly does it say there? So the most commonly prescribed drug for the disease occasionally has serious side effects such as seizures. Say that 10 times fast. So occasionally seizures. Okay, so this seems like a good reason to have some other drug. And then the other part of this passage is there's a but, right? So this new drug has more frequent side effects and it's mild nausea, but it's more frequent, right? Okay, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to support this statement that the new drug is clearly preferable as a treatment, despite the fact that there's frequent side effects. And, usually, what does it say exactly? Though no worse than mild nausea, but they're much more frequent, right? So much more frequent. Well, that sounds bad. I don't know about you guys, but this passage strikes me as silly. By the way, what I'm about to do here, please do not do this on your test. This is a bad way to think. It's a waste of your time. Don't do this. Don't let reality get in the way. So I'm going to show you something that's bad. I'm reading this and going, wait, this is ridiculous. Would you rather have an occasional seizure or frequent mild nausea? I'll take the frequent mild nausea every day of the week. Seizures are terrifying. Shout out to anybody who's dealt with epilepsy. A lot of it on my wife's side of the family. It's terrifying. You don't want a seizure. So what is this passage about? Don't let your brain do that. That's letting reality get in the way of your critical reasoning. Our job, narrow our brains. The new drug is clearly preferable as a treatment. We're going to go support that. Which of these answer choices does it? All right. A, people who experience nausea are prone to discontinue use of the new drug prematurely. That would be a reason why you don't want to use this new drug, because if you're not going to take it, this new drug that is effective as a treatment is going to cause damage. That's not good. You don't want that. A is out. By the way, Rachel, thank you for this. I love it when people make comments like this openly, because this is the kind of thing that happens, right? So if you've watched all of these videos, one of the things I certainly say a lot of, I say frequently in the first video or two, and maybe I don't say it enough after that. Where do errors come from? It's mostly not logic. It's mostly not even getting annihilated by language. I'd say 80% of errors we've seen in, 25 plus years of teaching now, it's you misread one little thing. You misread one little thing. And all of this crap I tell you over and over about structure, what to write down. Again, some of you will write down different things than others, but all this stuff about structure, get to that plan, get to that conclusion, get to the why, think structurally. It's all tools to help you avoid the misreads. So Ray, thank you for saying this out loud, because this is what happens for a lot of people. Odds are good that if you miss this question, you misread, misinterpreted something small. I just want you to really pay attention to that and go, wait a minute, if you're missing more critical reason than you want to, I don't want you to think, hey, I'm gonna go memorize more logic or work on more question types. I want you to think, hey, how do I catch those moments when I misread? How can I be a little bit more systematic? How can I build in a 5-second check to make sure I don't make that mistake? It's really easy to do, especially under time pressure. So Ray, thank you so much for making that comment, because it's, again, that's what people experience who miss it more often than not. All right, where were we? B, it is possible that the drug now most commonly prescribed has side effects that have not yet been attributed to it. Well, that sounds, I don't know, you could argue this is tempting, right? That it is possible that the existing drug has other side effects? I mean, is this really going to strengthen the idea that we should use the new drug? Is this going to strengthen the idea that the new drug is clearly preferable as a treatment just because the current drug might have some side effects we don't know about? I don't think that's very strong. You could argue that it does reinforce that a little bit because, oh, well, maybe there's something lurking out there. I think it's a pretty lousy answer choice. I would cross it out here personally. If you want to keep it and be conservative, I wouldn't blame you one bit. But saying that it is possible that maybe there's some side effects to the currently prescribed drug that we don't know about, I don't think that's a very good reason to say the new drug is clearly preferable just because there might be some side effects over there we don't know about on the current drug. I don't think that's very strong at all. You want to be conservative and keep it, knock yourself out. I'm getting rid of it because I don't really see how that supports this. Clearly preferable as a treatment, just because there might be side effects of this other thing, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that's strong enough. Out for me. C, other drugs for the disease have typically been prescribed only for patients allergic to the most commonly prescribed drug. That's not going to strengthen anything here. Is that going to tell us why this new drug is clearly preferable? If C said something like, oh, a lot of people are allergic to the current drug, that'd be different. But this is saying, hey, the new drug, people don't use it only when they're allergic to it. That doesn't strengthen the idea that this new drug is clearly preferable. So C is out. D, people who have received effective treatment for disease generally do not contract the disease again. That's good. That makes me happy. That has nothing to do with whether the new drug is preferable to the old drug. So D is out. Because again, both drugs are effective. E, I hope we like E. There is a non-prescription medication that when taken with a new drug prevents the onset of nausea. Great, perfect. That of course supports it because all you need to do is pop this non-prescription pill. You can go get it at your local drugstore. And we eliminate this only reason given in the passage why the new drug is not preferable, right? The only concern about it is frequent mild nausea. If you can pop a pill for the mild nausea and you're all good, that supports this idea that the new drug is clearly preferable. So E is our winner. Oh, good. Taha, thank you. This is great. Yeah, actually, Taha and Julia both. This is a really productive kind of mistake to make, I think. He only talks about preventing nausea, but what about seizures? A lot of the time, our temptation on critical reasoning is to say we want a perfect answer choice that deals with everything. And you don't necessarily need it here, right? So what do we know about the old drug? We know that it can cause seizures occasionally. What do we know about the new drug? But it doesn't say anything about causing seizures. Well, it kind of does actually. So in field tests, the new drug side effects, though no worse than mild nausea, turned out to be more frequent. So we know that the new drug does not have severe side effects. Again, seizures worse than mild nausea from what I've seen. So we actually already know that the new drug doesn't cause seizures, right? The only thing that it seems to cause are things that are no worse than mild nausea. So in order to strengthen the idea that the new drug is clearly preferable, what's the objection in the passage? What's the weakness of the new drug? Frequent side effects, no worse than mild nausea. So it's really just this nausea thing, right? So we don't need to strengthen this statement that the new drug is preferable. We don't need to strengthen it by mentioning seizures. We can strengthen it by just saying, hey, look, we've gotten rid of the nausea. Do we strengthen it? Yeah. More broad. So in this case, I don't think that answer choice needs to mention seizures at all. I think more broadly, the way to think about strengtheners, weakeners on critical reasoning is you'll notice that almost every single time, and again, an exception here on the fill in the blank questions, but it'll say which of the following most strengthens the argument, right? So you're not looking for something that's perfect. You're looking for something that strengthens, that is the best strengthener of the five. That's part of why I'm so adamant about cross elimination. I want you finding 4 wrong answers, not 1 right answer. You're looking for the best of the 5. It doesn't need to be perfect. So I don't want you in the habit of saying, well, we need something that addresses seizures. Do you? You need something that strengthens this. Strengthens that the new drug is clearly preferable. Now, in this case, they've eliminated seizures as a possibility in the passage for the new drug. But more broadly, I want you to think, hey, which of these 5 is best? Which 4 of these 5 are worst? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to mention seizures. Again, even if they didn't close that loophole, you might still say, yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to mention seizures to be the best strengthener of the group. And Julia, I think you're kind of, yeah, fair enough. I think you're on the right track there, where it's like, yeah, seizure is bad, but if you can fix that mild side effect to the new drug doesn't have the seizures, right? Because it says that there are that the new drug has side effects that are no worse than mild nausea. Seizures are clearly worse than mild nausea. Um, okay. And careful here. No, it's the old drug that leads to seizures. Old drug leads to seizures. So if you look at that second sentence, the drug now most commonly prescribed for the disease has serious side effects such as seizures. The new drug has side effects that are no worse than mild nausea. So slippery language there, but it's saying the old drug, occasional seizures, new drug, frequent nausea, but mild. Okay. All right, that was a fun one. That caused more trouble than I expected. That's good. And again, thank you so much to the live group because the things that you guys are struggling with are things that almost everybody struggles with, right? It's sometimes just catching those little nuances of language. And part of what makes this all so freaking hard. Hey, when you watch me do this, how long have I been on here? I've been babbling for 27 minutes now. So I just spent, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes on this one question. Well, you go take the test, the timer's pounding in your face. You know you've got about 2 minutes ish on the question. And it's easier to make those misreads. So a lot of you have heard me say this before, invest in that initial read, invest in making sure you're really precise in drawing those distinctions. If you tweak a couple words in the passage out of haste, that's when it's a lot harder to eliminate answer choices. You will be more efficient if this process of processing the passage is really spot on, really precise. I'm not saying slow, everything with full energy, but just make sure you're really precise with it. Don't try to save 15 seconds racing through the passage because it'll very easily cost you 30, 45, 60 seconds going through the answer choices. They'll be much harder to go through if you're not precise here. So again, invest in being systematic on the passage. Good things happen. And Akshat, thank you so much. And again, apologies for mispronunciations. No, thank you so much. I'm glad it's helping you. That's why we do this. All right. Next question. So this one is just straight up a little weird. Not weird like, oh, I'm never going to say anything like this again. But just it doesn't fit neatly into a category. I want you guys to have a little exposure to these, get used to the flexibility, because sometimes when you get to your exam, if you've studied too mechanically, strengthen, weaken, assumption, paradox, that's it, and you think in terms of question types exclusively, you see something like this and it's like, what is it? These are fairly common, these questions that don't fit neatly into a category. I will shut up now. Go ahead, guys, take a moment on this one. All right, seen a lot of agreement on the live group. So either you are all right or you are all wrong. Let's find out. Um, okay, so only reason I'm really bringing this question up, nothing particularly special about it, other than hey, here's a question type, I guess, or a question that doesn't fit neatly into categories you typically see on the GMAT. You see a lot of this on the LSAT, so main point of disagreement between two people. You occasionally see this actually on data insights, on two-part analysis questions where there's two people talking. There aren't very many of these on critical reasoning. And my point isn't, hey, here's what to do on this kind of question. It's, hey, just be braced for a variety in the question types. So depending on how you want to categorize things, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20% of questions don't fit neatly into a category. I want you to get used to that. Can you still be systematic? Yeah, sure. So these critics, do they have a clear conclusion? No, not stated, no, but they're critics of the decision. So what do we know? They don't like the decision. Is that exactly the words of the passage? No, which is why I put them in little brackets there. But we do have support for it, right? So why are they critics of the decision? What makes them critics? Well, hey, the town residents tend to dislike most abstract art. Any art in the town square should reflect their tastes. Fair enough. So there's the reasons why the critics are criticizing. Okay, then you got the spokesperson. So look, this is just like conclusion support, same as always. So you can still think structurally, you can still be precise with language, even when you get a question type that you haven't seen before. And again, taking up GMAT exams, even if you've practiced a ton, you're going to see some question types you haven't seen before. Just be flexible, but still be systematic. Okay, spokesperson, what is that individual's point? Well, basically it's, so the sculptors, other public sculpture, well, we'll just say that other public abstract sculptures, why am I having a hard time talking? Public abstract sculptures in other cities were popular. Okay. So we see the argument pretty clearly here. So critics are saying, don't like it. Why? Most people in our town tend to dislike most abstract art. Any art in the town square should reflect their tastes. And the spokesperson says, yeah, but in other towns, people really like this stuff. So, so what's the point of disagreement here? Is it, A, it would have been reasonable to consult town residents on the decision. So we're looking for something that they would disagree on. We don't know that the spokesperson would disagree with this. The spokesperson is just saying, no, everybody else likes it. So do they disagree that it would have been reasonable to ask residents? Not necessarily, no. B, most Sumpton residents will find the new sculpture to their taste. I think they do disagree on this, right? The critics are saying, hey, most of us don't like abstract art, and we want something that reflects our taste. And the spokesperson is basically saying, yeah, but everybody else likes it, so we're doing it. So let's hang on to B. That seems like a thing they disagree on. C, abstract sculptures. We do this live. If I can't talk, you get to hear me babble. Abstract sculptures by the same sculptor have truly been popular in other cities. Again, the critics don't necessarily disagree with that. They're not saying, no, you're wrong, everybody hates these. They're just saying, hey, we're not into this stuff. The critics don't disagree about the idea that other towns like it. So C is definitely out. D, a more traditional sculpture in the town square would be popular among local residents. This one is tempting. I'm seeing a couple people picking this one. It's tempting, right? Because in real life, what would the issue be? So imagine this argument in some small town. Well, presumably the critics, the townspeople, are arguing that a more traditional sculpture would be better. But we don't see that here. Again, don't let reality get in the way of your critical reasoning. What do we know? Nobody's discussing traditional sculptures here. The critics are saying, hey, we don't like abstract art. Most people here don't like abstract art. We want something that's more to our taste. What are their tastes? I don't know. Stick a stable of live horses in the front of the town square. Who knows, right? We know nothing about their taste. We don't know if they like traditional sculpture. What if they hate traditional sculpture even more? We don't know that. So we have absolutely no basis for saying, and we don't know about the spokesperson either. Is the spokesperson saying, well, you guys would hate traditional sculpture? We have no idea what the spokesperson thinks about traditional sculpture. We have no idea what the critics think either. All we know is the critics say, hey, this town's not going to like the abstract one. When the spokesperson's saying, yeah, but everybody else does. So there's no disagreement here about traditional sculpture. Again, in real life, there would almost have to be an alternative somewhere in this discussion. Critical reasoning, Nope. In this narrow little 3 sentence world we're in, we know nothing about their opinions on traditional sculpture. So we don't know that they disagree on traditional sculpture at all. We just know that they disagree in a certain way on the abstract ones. So D is out. E, public art that the residents of Sumpton would find desirable would probably be found desirable by the residents of other cities. Um, so this one's pretty tempting too, right? So public art that the residents of Sumpton would find desirable would probably be found desirable by the residents of other cities. Sounds good because what the spokesperson is arguing is, hey, these guys like it, won't you like it? But notice that this is a little bit flipped around. So public art that the residents of Sumpton would find desirable would probably be found desirable by residents elsewhere. That's something we don't know if they disagree. We don't know what the residents of Sumpton find desirable. We don't know what they like, which is why we can't say that they disagree about E. We have no idea what they like. Now, if E were flipped around, if it said public art that other cities like would be found desirable by the residents of Sumpton, we could argue that that's a correct answer. Here, public art that the residents of Sumpton would find desirable would probably be found desirable elsewhere. We don't know what these guys in Sumpton actually like. All we know is what they say they dislike. So E is out, B is our winner. All right. Okay. From here, we've got some choices, guys. I probably have time to get to two more. I think what I'm going to do is I'm seeing some comments coming. Let me see if I can make sense of these quickly. More popular. Sorry, a little hard for me to follow some of those. Sorry, Ta. I've got a couple more that are oddities that kind of combine elements of things we've done already. So accept questions that are a little bit weird, don't fit neatly into a category. First one we did, it's a plan consequence kind of question. This one would not be. Well, to fill in the blanks, a little bit odd too. And then I've got a couple other oddballs kind of floating around. Live group, if there's anything in particular you want to see, I'll do my best to accommodate. Let's see here. Before we get to any of that, if you've made it this far and you're not sick of me, even if you are sick of me, and you want to see more of this kind of thing, check out the QR code, full free GMAT video course. Got some kind of features built in there to kind of help you introspect about what's going wrong. So really good thing for self-studiers. And again, a lot of other tutors are in the videos that are in this free course. So yeah, if you want more quant data insights, all the things, check that out. All right, enough of that. Next question. One more accept question, a little bit stranger. Gonna take a moment. Right, as always, pause if you need to. Funky one, right? And yeah, you're you're not alone, Julia. This one's kind of funky. You're like, what did I what did I just read? This doesn't make any sense. And CFC random, thank you so much for this. I'm so glad it helps. That study plan is it's a lot to work through. It's not for everybody, so I'm super happy it helped. Congrats on the huge improvement. 120 points is a ton, so thank you so much for that. Yeah, what's funky here, the thing you hear me say over and over and over, and the rest of the GMAT Ninja team, when you watch the videos with all the guys who are smarter than me, and we'll say, hey, be structural, like take that passage, make sure you break down the passage first. I've said it how many times in the last 42 minutes, and then I read this one, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this. It just kind of seems to be some loose facts, like, hey, you can judge the performance of a company by comparing it to other companies. Ooh, that's really exciting. The technique commonly called benchmarking, in other words, called be creepy, look at other companies and see how you feel, permits the manager of a company to discover better practices and prevent. Okay, so all the passage is saying is there's a thing called benchmarking where you go look at other companies and you steal ideas. It's called copycatting. Okay, fine. I don't see any structure there. I don't know what to do with it. And then you get this funky question. So which of the following, and again, one of the big takeaways from this video, yes, I want you to be systematic with accept questions, cross anything that blank, and we'll fill in the blank in a moment. But they can throw some weird stuff at you. I don't want you to have an emotional reaction to it on your test. They can get creative, and you're like, well, what category does this fit into? I don't think it does fit into any category, really. So brace yourself for it. Any of the following, if true, is a valid reason for benchmarking the performance of a company against companies with which it is not in competition, rather than against competitors, except, well, wait, okay. So what do we want to cross out anything that is a reason for benchmarking against non-competitors instead of competitors? Okay. Cross out anything that is a valid reason for benchmarking, abbreviate that, against non-competitors, not competitors. Okay. I don't even know. I mean, honestly, being honest, guys, like, first time seeing this, I don't know what I'm looking for, really. Like, I've taken the time to kind of go through that question and say, okay, I understand what they're asking me for, but it's weird. I'm uncomfortable because this doesn't fit into a category. It's an odd thing. Okay, we weren't. I have no idea what's coming in the answer choices, and that's fine. We'll take them one by one. A, comparisons with competitors are more likely to focus on practices that the manager making comparisons already employs. Is this a reason why maybe you should look at non-competitors? Well, sure, because if we've already stolen everything we can from the competitors, then maybe we should look at non-competitors. So this is a reason why we should benchmark against non-competitors. So we can get rid of A because we're crossing out anything that is a reason to focus on benchmarking against non-competitors. B, getting inside information about the unique practices of competitors is particularly difficult. Okay, so if we can't get information about competitors, then if we want to benchmark, maybe we should do it against non-competitors. So that's a valid reason. We cross it out. C, since companies that compete with each other are likely to have comparable levels of efficiency, only benchmarking against non-competitors is likely to reveal practices that would aid in beating competitors. Well, that's a pretty bulletproof argument for benchmarking against non-competitors instead of competitors. So we get rid of that. Great reason. D, managers are generally much more receptive to new ideas they find outside of their own industry. So if a company is outside of your industry, it is by definition not a competitor. So if we're more receptive to ideas outside of our industry, those would be ideas from non-competitors. We're better off looking at those. So that's a valid reason to look at non-competitors. We cross it out. And I really hope we like E again. I feel like I've said that a lot in this video. Much of the success of good companies is due to their adoption of practices that take advantage of the special circumstances of their products or markets. That's great, but that doesn't tell us whether we should be looking at competitors or non-competitors. If anything, it kind of sounds like we should be looking at competitors because our own market is really special in some way. So yeah, E is not a valid reason to focus on non-competitors, and that's going to be our winner. Okay. Yeah, great. I love this. Thank you so much for this comment, Sai. This is a little bit like what we were saying on a previous question, where you're not necessarily looking for perfect. So you don't need an answer that's going to solve everything for you, right? And you also don't want to get in the habit. And again, I'm taking what you said here for a walk just because it's a mistake I see people make. Kind of two different mistakes here potentially. One is looking for the perfect answer choice. That's not what you're looking for here. You're looking for something that is a valid reason why you would focus on non-competitors and not on competitors. So you could look at A and say, well, hey, here's a reason why we shouldn't look at competitors, right? We already use those same practices in A, for example. So it only focuses on competitors, but it's a reason not to benchmark against competitors, right? So is that a reason why maybe you should benchmark against non-competitors instead? Sure. Is it perfect? Does it mean you definitely always should? Does it solve the problem? No. But is it a valid reason why benchmarking against competitors will be inferior to benchmarking against non-competitors? Yeah. So thought number one is you're not looking for perfect. You're looking for a valid reason. It doesn't have to address everything. It can address one part of it here, and that's fine. Second thing, and again, Sai, I don't know that this is what you're doing, but it's a thing I see a lot of from people. You don't want to word match, or I match is sometimes a word we use. But I think we actually have a whole video in our free course about word matching, which basically says, hey, in this case, it might be, I'm looking for the word non-competitor in all of my answer choices. If I don't see it, it must be irrelevant. Be really, really careful. And again, other questions, I think, do a better job of disguising that sort of thing or kind of giving the opportunity to make that I match when it's superficial. But I always want you to think, I don't want you to think, hey, does this element appear? That's not a good way to think on critical reasoning. I want you to think, what does this do? What is the impact of this statement? So if it's a strengthen question, you would say, well, it doesn't really matter which words appear, which concepts appear. Does it strengthen my conclusion, period? Don't worry about whether certain words appear or don't appear. Similar idea here. I want something that's a valid reason why I would choose to benchmark against non-competitors and not choose to benchmark against competitors. If it does that, it does that. If it's a reason why you would do that, then hey, it's a good answer. And I don't want you in the habit of worrying about, well, did this exact term appear? Because it's very, very easy to kind of create that trap for yourself and say, I want this certain word to appear. I matching is what I like to call it, word matching. Be really careful of that. Think instead about actual impact. So here are A and B reasons why you would benchmark against non-competitors. Sure, even though they don't mention the non-competitors. Okay, hope that helps a little bit. All right. Okay, I think we covered everything here. Find 4 wrong answers, always in my heart. Awesome, thank you. Yes, I agree with that. And a lot of, and again, we can debate whether it applies to this one because it's an accept question. It kind of feels inside out. But a lot of the time, and again, you see it in these videos. I mean, and this is a feeling, by the way, that never goes away. I mean, so I've been teaching critical reasoning for, I'm getting old, longer than some of you have been alive, embarrassingly. And I never lose that feeling sometimes of, I don't like the right answer. I don't think it's perfect. And I think several of you have kind of made the point today. Hey, but that answer choice doesn't address everything. Yeah, sometimes they're not perfect. And you kind of never lose that feeling of like, do I really have to pick this? Like I'm selecting whatever it is. I'm selecting D and kind of going, But if A, B, C, and E all stink, D doesn't have to be great. It just has to be better than A, B, C, and E for it to be the right answer. So it's one of those things that I think can make your life a lot easier if you think that way. And don't think about perfection in the right answer. Think about, can I find the 4 wrong ones? And sometimes that bails you out. And again, maybe there are people, certainly there are people smarter than me out there. Many of them might have the feeling taking the test that, yeah, I know for sure that these answers are right every single time on critical reasoning. That's not the feeling I have. The feeling I have is I'm certain 3/4 of the time, and about 1/4 of the time I'm going, I don't like this right answer very much, but I definitely don't like the other 4 more. Like these other 4 are definitely wrong. So I guess I'm fine, but I'm still uncomfortable. Get used to that feeling. I think it's part of the test. Okay. Great questions, you guys. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A couple of these are fantastic. This might make it hard for me to get through one more question here, but I think these are good. I think they're worth addressing. And take the question off the screen. So I feel these kind of questions where represent create a sense of chaos in the exam scenario. How do we tackle that to maintain focus on the questions? Yeah, this is such a good comment because I think it's what most people experience. And again, it might be for you on one section or another. Chances are, if you made it to minute 52 here on a critical reasoning video, you have this feeling on critical reasoning. Maybe you have it less on other question types. But for most people, there's something where you go, man, there's this feeling of chaos. Something feels out of control. These are getting harder. They're getting weirder sometimes. And especially, by the way, especially as you get nervous, and it's normal to feel nervous on test day, things feel weirder. What do you do about that feeling? What do you do about that feeling of chaos? Or what do you do about that feeling that, hey, I feel a little out of control of this test because it's giving me all this odd stuff and it's coming at me fast and I've got 45 minutes per section. And if I don't get a good score, I won't get into Harvard. And if I don't get into Harvard, my cat will hate me and the cat's going to barf all over my laundry and it's going to be terrible. Right? These things happen in your head. How do you stay focused? There are a lot of things we could say about this. The brief answer is, or as brief as I can make it. One is, notice that everything we do, so you're watching a critical reasoning series, I'm always talking about systems, always talking about processes. So when your brain starts racing, you start going, oh my God, this is feeling crazy. This question's weird, whatever that might be, or these external thoughts start to come in. I want you to focus on the process you've practiced. Quant, for example, it might be, hey, I want you to read every question twice. I want you to plot your path before you move forward. I want you to snap yourself back into, okay, what is my job in the question that's in front of me? What's my task? What's the task at hand? What's in front of me right now? Okay, it's a critical reasoning question. Okay, this thing is a assumption question. What's my job? What's my job? My job is conclusion. Their words are mine. Support. Their words are mine. Cross-elimination, right? So the more you can fall back on those things, and even on these weird questions you can, right? It's still cross-elimination. It's still thinking structurally. It's still their words or yours. So even if you don't like my methods or the way I message systematicness or process on critical reasoning or something else, have a process that you can focus on, because I think it helps you to kind of quell those feelings of chaos and those external thoughts. That's one thought. Second, I mean, there are all sorts of things you can do to just improve your ability to focus. And I don't necessarily want to spend a ton of time talking about them here. I'm not personally into meditation. It is just not a big part of my life, never has been, not my taste. There's a ton of evidence that it helps focus. Mindfulness training, meditation can be part of that. There's academic studies showing it improves exam scores, improves focus. That's a direction you can head in if you want to. Some of you guys work too hard. Take care of your bodies, sleep, eat, have a balanced life. Don't just lock yourself in and study, because the more stressed out you are, the more exhausted you are, the harder it is to focus. So lots more we could talk about that's kind of external to the test. Bottom line, props to you for recognizing it, because I think a lot of people don't want to recognize, hey, I have a feeling of chaos when I take the test. But it is the single biggest thing. The biggest thing that I'd say the biggest source of damage on tests is the inability to focus for one reason or another. So meet it head on, have systematic approaches, and think about the external stuff. Think about the things that aren't, specific to the test. Sleep, eat, have a balanced life, have a social life, do your best to be happy. Okay. 59, awesome, full. Great one too. How do you stop yourself from overthinking an answer choice? I end up thinking too far. Yeah, yeah. And have some other folks that are kind of in on this too. Yeah, it's hard. This is one where what's hard about this particular issue is that there is no easy rule of thumb. There's not an easy thing I can say that's just, hey, here's your magic bullet for not overthinking. I'd say a broad thing, maybe two thoughts on it. One is, one of the things, so as for everybody, whether or not you're aware that this is a problem for you, whenever you're reviewing your homework or a practice test, part of what a good practice can look like is identifying why you missed questions. So specifically to critical reasoning here. So did you just misread something that you were perfectly capable of understanding, right? You didn't get obliterated. You just missed a phrase. And again, thanks to Rachel for pointing out an example where he misread something. And it was just a simple little misread. There was nothing hard exactly about the sentences, or that one sentence was really long. Just got something mixed up. If that's happening, great. You need to take a breath, make sure it's their words, not yours, double check, right? So that's one type of error you're making. Another kind of error might be the rare cases where you are just totally lost in the question. Hey, this was just over my head. I didn't know what the pastor was saying. Fine. Another category is, wait a minute, I made up a kooky story about an answer choice. I overthought it. So number one for everybody, identify the source of your mistake. And it shouldn't be internal to that question, right? It's where did my process go wrong, or where were my skills insufficient? Usually it's not skills, right? Sometimes it can be, hey, I didn't understand the passage. Okay, fine. That stinks. That's no fun. It'll happen sometimes. Misread on something you could have understood. That's you. That's your process. Was it falling in love with an answer choice and you fell in love with B and you didn't really read C, D, and E? Okay, that's you. That's a process thing. You flipped something on an accept question. That's you. That's a process thing. Fixable. Overthinking is a little harder to see. But if you catch yourself doing it and you go, wait a minute, I picked C and it wasn't the answer because I made up a crazy story about it. What might that crazy story look like? I think it would contain the word if quite a bit. And there really shouldn't be very many ifs. I'm not saying there should be none, but there really shouldn't be a lot. If you go, well, hey, under a certain set of circumstances, answer choice D is going to strengthen this because blah, 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 blah. Because if this is true, and if this is true, whoa, too many ifs right there. How do you stop yourself from doing it? Step one is recognition. And I think that comes from being good about how you review your work afterwards. And second, listen for the ifs. Where are you getting it from? Why are you saying that might be a thing that's true? Because usually overthinking something involves creating a scenario. Where's that scenario coming from? Keep your world small. So don't let reality get in the way of your critical reasoning. Your world is those 3 sentences of the passage. That's it. If it doesn't say something about your ifs, you probably shouldn't be making those assumptions. It's a hard thing to catch and a hard thing to work on. But props to you for catching it in your process. All right. We are at the end of time. Live crowd, as always, thank you for the awesome questions today. Next week, MBA Spotlight. So we're in June 2026. Please join us for that. I will be, so I'm doing a couple, I'm doing an interview with a guy at GMAT. We're talking about kind of changes in the world right now. I think MBA admissions is changing. He'll give us some fresh data. AI is changing a lot of things. So what do schools want? What schools want has been changing. This guy, Jonathan Clay, works for GMAT, people who make this lovely GMAT exam, and he also is a former admissions officer. So we'll talk candidly about, hey, here's how schools are thinking differently about admissions criteria. So how can you think differently about your own application in a world where, hey, we've got AI to help us out with all sorts of things. Also doing a panel on things that clear your GMAT score with a mix of students and GMAT experts. And then 2 weeks from today, we will most likely do episode 8 of the critical reasoning series, nastiest, hardest critical reasoning questions. And coming up soon, GMAT Ninja podcast will also be here on YouTube. We'll be premiering that in this slot on Wednesdays starting in June. So keep an eye on the forum for that. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Anything you want to see in this series or an upcoming series on GMAT Ninja Wednesdays, tag me, GMAT Ninja Tutoring here on YouTube, or in the video description, you should have a link to the GMAT Club forum. You can tag me there as well at GMAT Ninja. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Especially live group. Great to see you here as always. Have fun studying.